Good evening. Today I'll be discussing the contents of week 2 for basics of biology and then some questions pertaining to that. Let me just share the screen first. Okay. Okay. So, uh, so in the previous week we had looked at classification, how different organisms are classified. In this week we will be looking at evolution of organisms. So, coming to the first lecture, uh, so as I said, we have learned about classification. Today we'll be learning about evolution. Uh, but before we go to that, the primary question is what is life? Which is the ability of an organism to reproduce, grow, produce energy through chemical reactions to utilize the outside materials. Uh, in the field of evolution, the scientists asked the question of how life originated on Earth and what were the conditions that led to this origin. There are multiple evidences that suggest that Earth and the planets within the solar system came to existence around 5 billion years ago. The the primitive Earth had two components: solid mass, the solid mass, which is called as lithosphere, and just a sec. Is there a question? Okay. The solid mass, which was known as lithosphere, and the surrounding gaseous envelope known as the atmosphere. As the temperature of the Earth cooled down below 1000 degrees Celsius, liquid components arose, which is known as hydrosphere. Now, this is hydrosphere, but this need not be essentially water or H2O. It is other chemicals which uh, liquefied to form hydrosphere. Okay. Now, so the current Earth consists of three parts, and these are as follows: baryosphere, which is the central core of the Earth, this portion. So this is essentially molten magma. This has a large quantity of iron and nickel and other ore materials. Even within this, there is a distinction in terms of inner core region, which is around 800 miles in radius, and an outer core region, which is around 1400 miles in radius. The next one, pyrosphere, it's the middle part of the Earth. This is also known as the mantle. This is around 1800 miles from in the Earth. This mainly has silica, manganese, and magnesium. Just a moment. Hello. Yes. Yes. Sorry. Um, okay. So pyrosphere is the mantle of the Earth, rich in silica, manganese, magnesium. Lithosphere is the outermost region of the Earth or the surface of the Earth, which it's also known as the crust. It mostly has silica and aluminum. It goes to around 20-25 miles in thickness. So if you were to drill a hole in the Earth, you first are present in lithosphere, then pyrosphere, and then baryosphere. There are So what is the prerequisite for life on Earth? What conditions make sure that life exists on Earth? Because there are a lot of planets in which life isn't present. So the first condition is little or no oxygen. So the original environment of Earth was a reducing environment. So this, by reducing the environment, what I mean is that the environment was devoid of oxygen atoms. It was primarily hydrogen compounds which were present, such as uh, methane, ammonia, etc. And due to the, because there is a gravitational pull of the earth, these gases remained within the atmosphere of the primitive earth. This reducing environment of the earth allowed for the synthesis of organic compounds and other inorganic substances. The If the environment of the earth was oxidizing in nature, none of the life would be prevalent as we see it, because if it was oxidizing, whatever compounds would form would oxidize and then form derivatives which won't be able to interact with other substances to form different kind of organic compounds. The next prerequisite is inorganic raw material for the origin of earth. uh, there was also a need for energy source. These energy sources were solar radiation, electric discharge, vocal eruptions, heat, cosmic rays. These were the sources which catalyzed the which provided the energy source for the production of these organic compounds from inorganic substances. Then uh, a lot of time was required to get to where we are today, because all of these, you need to remember that all of these reactions were happening non-enzymatically, and as a thumb rule, non-enzymatic reactions are way slower than enzymatic reactions. So because there were no enzymes formed at that point, it took a lot of time for different kind of organic substances to produce. Okay. Now, there are multiple theories that have been proposed throughout time to explain how our life originated on Earth. These are the 6 major theories. There are other theories beyond this as well, but those are not very popular and have been invalidated properly. The first one is the theory of special creations. We'll go through each one of these and just stop me if you have any questions. So, the theory of special creations proposed that God or any supernatural power created life on earth. The According to Christian beliefs, God had created universe, planet, animal, plant, and human in 6 natural days, and there are similar beliefs also present in other religions. So, the key beliefs of special creation was that all living organisms were created on the same day, so there was no difference in their appearance. In the time of appearance, they were created in the present form, therefore no evolution. So the population of species that you see in current day, according to theory of special creations, was also present in day 1 of earth. Their bodies and organs are fully developed to meet the requirement to run the life, and therefore there was no requirement for adaptation. There have been multiple objections. There are no experimental evidences that support these assumptions, and therefore majorly this is not believed. Next is theory of spontaneous generation. Non-living matter give rise to organisms. This is also known as theory of abiogenesis in certain literature. This assumes that non-living material gave rise to life in a spontaneous manner. Some supporting examples were when the hair of horsetail was dipped in water, it gave rise to horsehair worm or gordius. When fly larva develops on rotten meat, it was assumed that fly larva developed spontaneously on rotten meat. There are other examples as well, but all of these were were criticized and disproved by Lazzaro Spallanzani, Francesco Redi, and Louis Pasteur by a series of experiments. Now, what were these experiments? So, Francisco Reddy did did an experiment wherein he placed meat and fishes in three separate jars. Jar 1 was left as is, uncovered. Jar 2 was covered with a gauze which allowed for air transfer, but there was no transfer of material. Jar 3 was covered with parchment which sealed the container completely. What the end result was that uh, maggots from flies developed in jar 1. They also developed in the surface of the gauze that was present on jar 2, whereas jar 3 there was no flies developing. Therefore, it was what Francisco Reddy concluded was that the theory of spontaneous generation is invalid, at least in these time frames. Next, the experiment that Spallanzani did had a similar principle. What they did was they heated broth, then one of the flasks was left open and for a few days, the other one was sealed. The one which was left open gave rise to microbial growth, whereas the one which was sealed had no growth. Eventually, when this sealed flask was opened, it also showed growth. That the key message was that there needs to be continuity between air and the contents of the flask to show growth. Louis Pasteur also did a similar experiment wherein he designed a flask with an S-shaped curved tube, and he took a hay infusion in the flask and boiled for several minutes. After cooling, there was steam collection and it condensed here in the vent of the flask and acted sort of like a barrier between air and the contents of the flask. In the intact flask, there was no growth seen. However, if the S-shaped tube was broken down, there was microbial growth seen in the flask. Next theory is the theory of catastrophism, which is similar to theory of special creations. What theory of catastrophism says is that there is creation of life followed by a catastrophe due to geographical disturbances. This might be a meteorite shower, this might be earthquakes, this might be lightning storm, anything. And this catastrophe completely wipes out the life present on earth, and the next creation cycle creates life forms that is slightly different from the previous one. Therefore, these series of catastrophes and creation lead to are responsible for evolvement of different types of organisms on earth. This also has been objected as the previous one, as there are no scientific experiments to support the hypothesis. Sorry, are there questions? No. Okay. Okay. Please stop me if you have any questions here. Next is a theory of cosmozoic theory of cosmozoa, where it is thought that life on earth has come from another planet. It was put forth by Richter and very strongly supported by Arrhenius, and the theory assumes that whatever life is present on earth was arrived from another planet in form of resistant spores, and these spores then, upon finding a hospitable environment, grew and evolved into different organisms. This is also known as theory of panspermia or spore theory. This theory initially got some support from different fossils of microorganisms that was found in meteorites, but there is no mechanism known of how the transfer of spores happened or how the spores could survive the journey in space, because that's devoid of air, water, everything. Also, this does not describe how different life forms are present in earth, because there are only so many things a spore can carry. Next is theory of eternity of life. This theory assumes that the life has no beginning or end, and it is believed that life as we know has been always existing and will exist even in a few years, and is also known as a state. This theory is also known as steady state theory. This has been rejected because it does not have evidences that support initial life forms, forms which have gone extinct, and new life forms that have appeared. Okay, so these are all the 5 life forms which have been successfully rejected. Next, modern theory. So modern theory states that chemical molecules have given rise to generation of organisms, but this is different from the spontaneous generation theory. This theory, this is known as the theory of primary abiogenesis. Theory of abiogenesis. Remember, the previous one was known as theory of abiogenesis, but it was the development of organisms happened spontaneously from chemical compounds. However, this hypothesis states that there is a condition to this hypothesis, that non-living materials can give rise to life only in the conditions of primitive earth. They cannot give rise to life in current day scenarios, because right now the environment that we have is an oxidizing environment. So this idea of chemical theory was put forth by A.I. Oparin and J.B.S. Halden. It had the following assumptions: that spontaneous generation of life in the present day conditions is not possible, and the atmosphere of earth 1 billion years ago was very different from the current conditions. The primitive earth had a reducing environment, whereas today's earth is an oxidizing environment, and under these conditions the chemical molecules react with each other through a series of reactions to form organic substances and other complex biomolecules, and the source of energy for all of these chemical reactions was solar energy and UV radiation. So essentially the sun of primitive earth. So the experimental evidences that support the theory of primary abiogenesis was not put forth by Halden. Rather, these were experiments done by Miller and Urey. What they did was that they had a glass flask, a condenser. To condense whatever gases are produced inside the glass flask, and a liquid flask to provide water source. Now, what they did was they introduced a mixture of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen in the glass flask, and in a ratio of 2:1. Remember, this is trying to recapitulate the conditions that were present in primitive earth, but this need not be the actual ratio of compounds that were present in that time. And water vapor at 800 degrees Celsius. The mixture was allowed to circulate in this closed glass apparatus for 18 days. The energy was provided in form of spark, supplying electricity at 75,000 volts through 2 electrodes. These mimic lightning in the primitive earth atmosphere. While passing the mixture, gases were passed through a liquid flask to stimulate volcano, and then they were collected here using a stopcock and then analyzed using chromatographic and calorimetric techniques. The analysis of this mixture indicated that there were presence of amino acids such as glycine, aniline, aspartic acid, nitrogenous bases such as adenine, etc., found in the mixture that was collected at the stopcock. So these were the proposed reactions that might have given rise to the compounds that were found finally in the sample that they have analyzed. The carbon dioxide present in the earth can break down to carbon monoxide and atomic oxygen in presence of the electric spark. This atomic oxygen can react with methane to form formaldehyde. This can also the carbon monoxide can react with ammonia to form uh, hydrogen cyanide. This hydrogen cyanide can also form from the reaction between methane and ammonia. Then to form glycine, uh, glycine was formed from formaldehyde, hydrogen cyanide and ammonia. This is the intermediate compound that formed before glycine formation. This compound then reacted with water to form the glycine, the final glycine compound. Okay, according to this theory, there are a series of steps that give rise to life. It's not a single step process. First is the formation of inorganic molecules. So remember, there is a high temperature of the primitive earth. This does not allow for condensation of atoms of any of the inorganic molecules. As the temperature went down, these atoms condensed and they gave rise to simpler molecules such as ammonia and hydrogen, carbon, etc. So the elements that were most abundant in primitive earth was hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and carbon, and there were reactions happening between all of these three. All the unstable compounds were degraded, whereas stable compounds such as ammonia, hydrogen, nitrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, etc., these survived. These were then these simpler compounds reacted with each other to form monomeric organic compounds such as sugar, fatty acids, glycerol, amino acids, organic bases such as purine, pyrimidine, that will later form the basis of DNA and RNA. These organic molecules then were condensed, and as the temperature of the earth lowered down, and all of these compounds were present in the primordial ocean. Now inside the primordial ocean, these smaller, simpler organic compounds started to react to form complex organic compounds such as glycerin, ribose, glucose, etc. And again, heat of the sun was utilized to provide energy for these reactions. These compounds that were forming later started to coalesce together to form colloidal aggregates known as quacervates. These quacervates formed in such a way that there was a layer of water molecule present around the protein molecules present inside the quacervates. This essentially created a high concentration region inside the membrane that had formed, and the increase in concentration led to an enhancement of the chemical reactions. These colloidal aggregates then absorb other compounds from their surroundings, and this resulted in an increase in complexity. These quacervates can also divide into multiple small ones, and the process gets repeated again. The quacervates they divide and then grow bigger in size. As now, these quacervates at this point are just protein molecules present in a water film. Later, when other complex compounds started to emerge, what happened was that lipid molecules started to combine together to form a plasma membrane, which you will read about in probably next week. Plasma membrane, they started to synthesize stuff like enzymes. Presence of nitrogenous bases led to formation of RNA and DNA, and all of these compounds came together to form the uh, first cell-like uh, entity known as a protocell or eobiont. So these are essentially coacervates with nucleic acid. They have the ability to divide into smaller coacervates, but the process becomes more regulated as the nucleic acid was incorporated into the coacervate. So now we are at a stage where the individuals are known as protocells. Now these protocells uh, eventually develop, have more complex compounds inside them, and give rise to the first cell on the earth. And the mutation in DNA and the selection of fast growing cell give rise to the first primordial cell, and this then mutates and develops into other types of cells. The first cellular form on earth appeared around 2000 million years ago. Okay, so the origin of life, the proposed events of origin of life is that formation, the first step is formation of inorganic molecules, the second step is formation of monomeric organic compounds, the third step is spontaneous formation of complex organic compounds, fourth step is spontaneous formation of molecular aggregates. Then these molecular aggregates known as quacervates can spontaneously divide into multiple small ones, which then incorporate nucleic acid into them and form the first cells. Okay, this is some of these steps are well studied. There are enough evidences for that, but some of these, the others are still under study. So we have looked at what are the different theories that have been proposed to explain the origin of life on earth. So why are we looking at all of this? What we are trying to see is evolution. How has life evolved from the single cell organism that was present in the primitive earth to what we are today? What and how the development has occurred. So the process of progressive advancement of organisms is by a process known as evolution. Aristotle, who is considered as the father of biology, has considered evolution as a ladder of chain, or scala naturae as he called in his book, involving a hierarchical linking of series of forms. So the first step was inanimate matter, then came lower plants, higher plants, zoophyta, entoma, etc., and humans as we are today. The term evolution literally means a change from one form to another, and change in the living organism with time is known as organic or biological evolution. This also can be understood by the fact that unicellular organism appeared first, then simple multicellular organisms such as sponges, then complex multicellular organisms such as plants and vertebrate animals. And then fishes were also initial vertebrates that gradually changed to form amphibians. Amphibians produced reptiles. Some ancestor of amphibians produced reptiles, and this further evolved further to produce birds and mammals. And in the same series, mammals have evolved into human, involving ape-like primates by acquiring different changes through course of time. Now, what are the scientific evidences that show that organisms are evolved from previously existing organisms? Here, study of physiology and anatomy give an idea of development of different organisms. what are the similar traits between different organisms and what are the differences, how are these similarities and differences correlated between different species. Now these evolutionary evidences can be divided into multiple types. The first one is morphological and structural evidence, which comes in form of body organization, homologous organs, analogous organs, gradual modifications that we see, and connecting links. Next one is embryological evidences, and the third type is paleontological evidences. Coming to the first type, morphological or structural evidences, this comes from a comparative study between of the morphology and anatomy between different organisms that indicate that few of the features present in each organism between the organisms that are being compared are similar. The first one is the body organization. The level of organization gives an idea of the evolution of an organism. It might be a unicellular organisms. These unicellular organisms are single cells, most primitive body organization. These might coalesce to give rise to tissues, and these tissues then can form then can combine to give rise to organs. Different organs can combine to give rise to an organ system. For example, amoeba will come in the unicellular organism level. Sponge will come as it's multicellular, but it's not organized into tissue. It exhibits a cellular level of organization. Coelenterate cells are organized into tissues but do not form organs. And platyhelminthes and higher level animals show organ system level of body organization. So as we see the classification system, we can see that there is a because of the way it has been classified, there is a idea of how evolution has occurred, or the classification system was born with an idea of how evolution has occurred. Coming to the second type, homologous organs. These organs are present in different species. They have a common descent, but they look different. They have different kinds of functions. So homologous organs are same descent but different functions. So, and this is based on divergent evolution. Examples are forearm of man, cheetah, whale, and bat. In case of man, it is developed for grasping. In case of cheetah, it's developed for running. In case of whale, it's developed for swimming. Whereas in case of bat, it is developed for flying. Remember, all of these develop from the forearm of the animal, indicating that the ancestor that they developed from was the same. However, they have evolved divergently to perform different functions. Now, another example is thorn and tendril that are present in plants. Both are homologous organs, but the thorn is responsible for protecting the plant against herbivores or herbivorous animals, whereas tendrils are responsible for keeping the plant upright. But both of these arise from the same descent. Coming to the next one, which is known as analogous organs, which have the same functions, but they look similar, but they are from different structures. They are from different descent. These are based on convergent evolution, where two distant ancestors develop in similar conditions to give rise to similar organs. For example, insect wings and bird wing, both of these are responsible for flying, but they are in case of insect wings, they are an extension of the integument, whereas the bird wing is formed from limb bones. Another example of the analogous organs is pectoral fins of fishes and flippers of dolphin, both of which are responsible for swimming, but they have different structures. The flippers are from 4 limbs, whereas fins are from pentadactyl. Now, there are multiple examples wherein organs or tissues or organ systems exhibit gradual modifications during the course of organic evolution. Heart is one such example, wherein initial initially the heart was two chambered. For examples, in uh, two chambered in case of fishes. Then it became three chambered in amphibians. It became pseudo four chambered in reptiles, and then it developed into a complete four chambered heart in higher reptiles, birds, and mammals. Now this is the typical embryonic heart from a vertebrate does not have all of this segmentation. So this gives an example of how gradual modifications occur during the course of evolution. Next is connecting links. These are living organisms that exhibit characters of two different group of animals, and these animals are present somewhere in between in the classification system. The first example is Euglena, which is dual character of plant and animals. It can perform photosynthesis through specialized chloroplast, but it can also uh, perform it has a contractile vacuole, mouth, binary fission like animal. Next is peripatus, which is an example of connecting link between arthropods and annelids. It has a worm-like body, unjointed legs similar to annelids, whereas claws, jaws, trachea, dorsal tubular hearts like arthropods. Egg-laying animals, for example, duck-billed platypus. These are a connecting link between reptiles and mammals. Remember, mammals are viviparous in nature, not oviparous. They develop their young ones inside them and then nurture the young ones. So platypus has mammalian characters like hair, mammary glands for nurturing young ones, diaphragm, whereas it also lays eggs with yolk and eggshell similar to reptiles. Some other examples of connecting links is Neopalina, which is an connecting link between annelids and mollusks, Balanoglossus, non-chordates and chordates, Chimera, link between cartilaginous and bony fishes, Coelacanth, and link between bony fishes and amphibians, Spenodon, connecting link between amphibians and reptiles. These connecting links indicate that these organisms have evolved from a common ancestor and then they have diverged at one point. Embryological evidences give an idea of how can be done by a comparative study of embryos of different organisms, and this phenomenon was explained by Ernst Haeckel by proposing biogenetic law, where he states that an organism in its individual development follow different developmental stages through which its ancestors have passed in the course of evolution. In other words, ontogeny represents phylogeny. For example, in case of frog, it develops it forms a fish like tadpole larva with tail, fins, gills for breeding in water. It indicates that frog at some point has evolved from a fish like ancestor. The same goes for humans, where they have an initial fish like a stage in the embryo where it looks like a fish, which then develops into the current condition. Next is paleontological evidences, which is based on fossil record. It essentially studies the number, nature of fossils, where it is placed, and distribution in what strata, as in which layer of the earth, and it gives an idea of what organisms were present in the primitive earth, what organisms are present in the current condition, and it gives us an idea of how evolution has occurred. There are instances where there are connecting links found between different species which are no longer existent in the current time, but their fossils have been found. These Fossils are remains or impressions of ancient organisms preserved by natural means in some medium. These mediums can be sedimentary rocks, amber, asphalt, volcanic ash, ice, peat bogs, sand, mud, etc. Uh, what is the mechanism of fossil formation? When during for example, in case of sedimentary rocks, during formation, dead animals of the sea or large lakes or land carried to the sea by rivers sink down, get buried in the rocks. Due to limited supply of the oxygen, the uh, remains are preserved, they won't oxidize, and the decay rate is minimal. As a result, animal remains are preserved in the rock, and eventually, due to the high pressure, due to the temperature, due to lack of oxygen, they form fossils. They get preserved layer by layer in the sedimentary rocks. Deeper they are, earlier the fossil is, and upper layer usually is of most recent fossils. There are 7 different kinds of fossils: amber, asphalt, ice, volcanic ash, peat bogs, storm dust, and sand dunes. And depending on where they are present, different kinds of fossil have different modes of formation. And some examples are: an entire organism can be fossilized if it's fossils of entire organism can be found if it's frozen in ice, encased in amber, trapped in asphalts, or buried in peat bogs. And these are some of the examples: woolly mammoths in Siberia, insect cytoskeleton, mummies of mammals, birds found in California, giant elk of Ireland. Skeletal materials can be found trapped in sedimentary rocks because there is some decay that happens, because of which soft tissues are usually broken down. These therefore are bones, teeth, shells, chitinous exoskeletons that are usually found. Molds and casts, these are hard parts trapped in sediment that harden to rock. The skeleton then dissolves later, decays essentially, leaving us impression as mold. These gastropods from Poland are one such example, and there are multiple such examples that give an idea of where in evolution the organism was present. How do you know the age of the fossil? It can be determined by multiple methods. The first one is relative dating method, wherein the position, erosion rate of the rock in that particular environment give an idea of where the in which time period the fossil belongs to. The older rocks are situated deeper, which are situated deeper have ancient fossils, whereas superficial rocks have fossils or have more recent ones. Absolute dating methods are usually use spontaneous decay of unstable radioactive nuclei into stable radioactive nuclei at a known rate. This can be either through uranium lead technique, wherein so this technique was introduced by Baltud in 1907. Rocks naturally contain uranium-238 in form of mineral zircon. This uranium then by a radioactive decay chain forms lead-206, which is stable in nature. The half-life of this whole reaction is 4.5 billion years, which half-life usually means how much time it takes for the decay of 50% of the compound that is being studied. So the content of uranium and lead give an idea of how, the age of the rock. It can be backdated after that. The second method is using carbon dating technique, wherein which was developed by W.F. Libby in 1950. Again, radioactive carbon C14 is found naturally in rock. This C14 can decay into nitrogen with a half-life of 5600 years, and this can be used to measure fossil age up to 25,000 years old. Next is potassium argon technique, where radioactive potassium K40, which is usually found in rocks of all kinds, disintegrates to form argon with a half-life of 1.3 into 10 to the power 9 years. Using all of these radioactive dating techniques allows for determination of fossils found in different sedimentary rock samples. This has helped scientists gather uh, idea of Earth and different species present on Earth to almost 400 million years ago. Then these Earth history has been split into 5 different time frames known as eras. Few of these eras are divided into periods, which are in turn split into epochs. The primary eras are as follows: Archeozoic, 4600 to 3500 million years ago. This is the first era, which begins with formation of Earth and presence of solar system. However, there is no fossil form available from this era. This is just the proposed timeline. Proterozoic era, which marks the origin of prokaryotes, primitive metazoans, and eukaryotes. There are some very minimal fossils found in this era. Paleozoic, 570 to 280 million years ago. This shows the appearance of invertebrate fishes and amphibians. There are also reports of spore-bearing plants, tree ferns, origin of conifers, etc. available. There are also some fossil reports available from this era, which is allowed for the placement. Note that there are some gaps here for which there are no fossils ever found. Mesozoic era, 225 to 135 million years ago. It marks appearance of toothed birds, mammals, reptiles, dominance of dinosaurs. Placental mammals are also found in this era. Reports of cycads and flowering plants are also available. Then comes the Cenozoic era, or the modern era, which has the present age man, modern mammals, birds, fishes, etc. So we have learned of what evolutionary evidences are present, and how these help in categorizing where in the evolution the organism is present. Next comes, what is the mechanism of evolution? There are several theories that have been proposed to put forth to explain the process of evolution. 3 of these theories, which have garnered a lot of attention in the past and in present, are theory of inheritance of acquired characters, theory of natural selection, and Hugo de Vries' theory of mutation theory. Now, theory of inheritance of acquired characters was proposed by French biologist Lamarck in his famous book Philosophie Zoologique, where he proposed that organisms are not fixed and they evolved from pre-existing organisms by modifications alone. He proposed assuming that there is a need for there are new needs because of variations in the environment, and because of the overall circumstance changing where the organism is present. There is a need for certain adaptations for the organism to survive, and this because of this need, the organism has to put in some effort to fulfill its need, and then it just needs to change, and this new habit then incorporates into its body and is passed on to its offsprings. This second assumption is that acquisition of characters happens spontaneously, and in these acquired characters, because of the new needs, happen to be inherited by the offsprings. It can be transmitted from one generation to the subsequent one. Thus Lamarck proposes that evolution is a slow process, and the new characters that are acquired over the course of time can be passed on to later generations. There are 3 ways to acquire the characters as proposed by Lamarck. Innate tendency, where each organisms want to perfect its functions and wants to acquire greater complexity, and in the process of perfecting, the organism is better and adapted to the environment. Use or disuse of organs. use or disuse of organ can affect their structure, shape, efficiency, and functioning. More usage brings more strength to the organs, whereas less usage leads to making the organ more rudiment, weaker and smaller, and therefore it might disappear after a point. Environmental factors such as variations in temperature, light, humidity, wind, enemies, etc., also makes changes in the lifestyle and habits, and these combined with the use and disuse and influence of environmental factor results in the change of body of these organisms, and are known as acquired characters. One of the examples uh, from Lamarck's book is of this giraffe. Lamarck uses this hypothesis that giraffe evolves from a short height deer like ancestor. These ancestors were living in a barren place with leaves on trees, and therefore they had to crane their neck to reach the leaves, for stretch their neck to reach the leaves, and therefore in the process it stretched its neck and forelimbs. These organs got elongated, and these acquired characters in the first generation passed on to the subsequent generation, and this process accumulated over time, evolving into a giraffe with long neck and forearms. Other examples proposed by Lamarck that support Lamarck's theory is that of a blacksmith, where they acquire large biceps due to rigorous hammering, or due to rigorous hammering for welding. Rabbit develops a pinna to move the ear to receive sound from different directions. Aquatic birds like ducks that need to go into the water for food and protection develop a web between the toes to float on water. Snake, which has a lizard-like ancestors, lost their legs because they had to be present in dense vegetation, narrow spaces, where they had to hide their body, didn't use their legs for a long time, and stretched elongated their body, because of which their body became more cylindrical and they lost the legs. Deer, where it has acquired speed through continuous running to protect itself from enemies. Cave animals, because they had to stay in low light environment, did not use eyes much, and in the process lost their vision over the course of time. There has been a lot of criticism for Lamarck's theory, wherein they have the initial two assumptions, that new needs and use and disuse of organ and environmental factors have been proposed to be correct, whereas the third assumption, that inheritance of acquired characters to the subsequent generation, is kind of arguable, primarily because all of these changes that were happening to the somatic cells. So in every organism, in every sexually reproducing organism, there are germ cells, which is either the sperm or the ovum, and there is the somatic cells, which make up the rest of the body. The characters that are present in the sperm and the ovum are the only thing that is going to go to the next generation. Whatever changes occur in the somatic body, unless there is a way to relay those changes into the sperm and the ovum, there is no way to propagate those changes into the next generation. Therefore, inheritance of acquired characters to the subsequent generation is found to be arguable. There are evidences in favor of this theory, there are also evidences against it. The major objection was by an experiment performed by August Weismann, where according to Weismann's theory of continuity of germplasm, as I said, there are two types of cells, somatic and germ cells. If what Weizmann did was that he cut the tail of rats for 80 generations, but the rats that but there were never rats produced that were tailless, because the cutting of the tail was not information of the cut tail was not propagated to the germ cells. So as a result, the acquired character, that is the tailless character, was not inherited. The second other evidences are the ear piercing that women have practiced for thousands of years was never inherited. There are other examples wherein European women wear tight garments to maintain a slender waist, but they have children of normal waist at birth. Chinese women wear tight shoes to have small feet, but their children have a normal feet. Children of athlete or children of noble laureate are not like their parents. They Pavlov did an interesting experiment where he trained mice to come for food upon ringing a bell only. If the bell wasn't rung, the mice don't come for food. He found that the training was necessary for each of the generations. The Lamarck theory was then redeveloped into something known as neo-Lamarckism, where the modified theory had the following postulates: that the germ cells are not always immune from the effect of environment. These may be affected directly by the environment without any effect on the somatic cells, and therefore they may carry acquired character to the next generation. One of the examples was that so there are experiments wherein mice are fed with mutagens of different kind, which or they are irradiated by mutagens, and these mutagens also change the structure, the genetic makeup of the germ cells as well. If these germ cells change, their progenies that come in the next generation will have mutations that from because of the changes in the environment. Okay, so we know about the theory of inheritance of acquired characters. Now next comes the theory of natural selection, which was proposed by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. Both of them have conducted a scientific data collection from their own experiments, and what Charles Darwin did was he traveled around the world in HMS Beagle. He observed different plants, animals, and he then observed the similarities amongst these animals and drew their evolutionary relationship. In addition, there was a report by an economist, Thomas Malthus, that recognized that competition between species led to struggles for existence. This further fed on to what Charles Darwin was proposing. And considering all of this, Charles Darwin proposed that the theory of natural selection in his book of Origin of Species. The theory of natural selection has its own assumptions and points. The first point is rapid multiplication, in which every organism has enormous ability to reproduce for continuance of the species, and this these organisms multiply in geometrical progression. So if there was one organism, they'll double and they'll grow 4 times, 8 times, etc. As the time progresses. But if that were the case, paramecium, codfishes, oyster, elephants, plants, all of these multiply at a rate in which they would probably overwhelm the earth. The second condition is limited natural resources. Despite the enormous capacity of an organism to reproduce, the number of individuals of a species remain constant due to This is essentially due to a cycle wherein an increase in population of the animal or plants requires more resources, space, or food. Eventually, this space, the resource, becomes limited in the universe, and therefore it does not allow the population of the organisms go beyond a particular point. After a certain number of cycles, equilibrium is reached. Third is struggle for existence. Due to shortage of food, water, space, there is severe competition amongst the offspring of for existence, and there are a few basic requirements: food, space, water, reproduction, and protection. The organisms compete with each other, they struggle for existence, and this struggle can be of three types: intraspecific struggle, wherein this struggle is between individuals of the same space. Fights, territorial fights, wars, etc., come under intraspecific struggle. Interspecific struggle, wherein this is competition between individuals of different species, wherein prey, for example, a tiger attacks on a deer for food. Prey predator relationships come under interspecific struggles. Environmental struggles, each individual has to struggle against the environmental changes such as temperature, humidity, water level, rain, climate, etc. The fourth point is variation, wherein each and every individual varies in several aspects with another individual of the same species. Even offsprings that are produced by one pair of parents differ in many aspects, and these can be different from each other in their behavior, color, size, strength, etc. The fifth condition is natural selection. Due to variation amongst different individuals, they struggle for existence with different potentials, and the variation allows some individuals to survive and complete their life cycle in a comfortable way, whereas some variations are unfavorable and those individuals will struggle a lot, and as a result may not be able to cope up with the life cycle. For example, a fast running deer has a better chance to escape than a slower runner. So essentially, if the variation present in a individual is favorable in the environment it is present in, then it is going to be able to complete its life cycle, produce offsprings, and in case if the variation is unfavorable, they'll die in that environment. Another factor is its ability to adapt to a changed environment. Certain environments are very variable, and therefore if an individual is very plastic, or if the features of an individual are plastic, then they can adapt to different changed environment. And both Darwin and Wallace recognize that environment is a principal factor for natural selection. For example, plants with ability to hold more water and which can reduce loss of water can ultimately survive and have offsprings. The sixth point is inheritance of useful variation. Sure, variations might occur, but these variations can need to be passed on to the next generation. The individuals that survived due to unique variation may produce their offsprings to complete their life cycle. They should be able to transfer the variations into next generation and allow individuals to multiply. And what Darwin believed is that any variation that can help the individual to survive and favor the struggle in a particular environment will be inherited. So he considered that the variation that are present may be acquired or inheritable. The seventh point is formation of new species, wherein as a result of natural selection and struggle, only individuals fit to survive in the environmental conditions will survive and complete its life cycle. As a result, these individuals will increase over the course of time as compared to a less favorable organisms, and therefore the variations will accumulate, and the favorable variations will accumulate, whereas unfavorable variations will be discarded. Due to this continuous process, a new organism will appear which will be very different from the ancestral individual. This is essentially survival of the fittest. So the theory of natural selection is based on rapid multiplication, limited natural resources, struggle for existence, variation, natural selection, and inheritance of useful variations, formation of new species. And according to natural selection, if we take the giraffe example, in the beginning there were two different types of giraffe present, one short, one long, both of which had equal ability as long as grass was available on land. When the species because the grass was available on land, both of these species were surviving. When there is, with changes in the climate and reduction of grass, there might be a struggle for food, because of which they have to depend on trees which have leaves at an height. Therefore giraffe with long neck will, and giraffe like animals like with long neck and forearms will be able to eat, whereas the shorter individuals won't and die due to starvation. Therefore in the process of natural selections, only these individuals will survive. Evidences that support the theory of natural selection. The first one is artificial selection, wherein humans have always selected good breed animals and plants, and they have employed it for their use, and in this and they have crossbred different species to develop new breeds with desirable characters, showing that artificial selection is possible, and this gives an supporting evidence for natural selection. Scientists supporting Darwin's theory explained that evolution through natural selections gives rise to newer species, just like artificial selection by man. Natural selection is a slower process but much more complex compared to artificial selection procedures. Mimicry and protective coloration is the second evidence, wherein many animals acquire a pattern or coloration by gradually changing their color at each stage. So there will be a connecting color in between. Correlation between nectarines and proboscis. So position of the nectarines on flowers and proboscis of the insect correlates to facilitate pollination, and this does not evolve in a single day but evolve gradually to envisage the process of evolution of natural selection. So if the position of nectarines and proboscis is not as it is today, then propagation of flowers and the insects won't happen, because of which both of these species will die out. There are also evidences against the theory of natural selection. The first one is perpetuation of vestigial organs. These are organs that are selected despite the fact that they are not useful to any animals and are preserved generation over generation. One of the examples is appendix. No explanation for variation. Darwin could not explain the source and mechanism of the generation of variation in the organisms. There's no the distinction between continuous and discontinuous variation was not there. So Darwin assumed that any variation essential for animal survival will be carried forward to next generation. This is not true because acquired characters won't go into the next generation. Disapproval of pangenesis theory of Darwin. Darwin put forward the theory of pangenesis to explain the theory of inheritance, which was disproved by August Weismann in 1892. Okay. Now, the third theory, Hugo de Vries' theory or mutation theory. Now, both theories of Lamarck and Darwin are based on population based studies, but both of these theories cannot explain the origin of variation or how the variation is transmitted from one generation to the next generation. To understand this gap, Dutch botanist Hugo de Vries put forth mutation theory in 1901. By his theory, he states that the new species arise from a pre-existing one in a single generation by sudden appearance of new features through a genetic variation known as mutations. So, whatever Darwin and Lamarck were proposing was continuous variation, wherein each of the individual is slightly different from the previous individual. But what de Vries was proposing was that the variation introduction is not a continuous process, rather it's a discontinuous process wherein a single mutation can change a lot. So what he proposed is that evolution is a sudden, discontinuous and jerky process rather than a continuous and gradual process. He termed the process as salation or single step large mutation. In addition, natural selection works on mutation and preserves the mutations found useful, eliminates the mutants which have harmful mutations. He didn't what the theory didn't have is the struggle between the organisms considered between the mutated organism with the non-mutated organism. So, to test out the mechanism of evolution, he conducted an experiment with evening primrose, a flower, wherein a flowering plant, wherein there he propagated normal evening primrose, around 50,000 specimens, self-pollinated them, and then grew the seeds. Some of the plants were normal, whereas there were few plants which were different. These different plants were allowed to pollinate. These different plants produced either similar kind of plants or they produced a slightly more different plant. So, what he observed was that in each generation, majority of the offsprings were similar to their parents, but a few were variants. And he found that these variants were of 4 types. Progressive, which had newer traits; retrogressive, which had reduced or lost traits as compared to their parents; degressive, which plants which were different but had a weaker survival; inconstant, these plants are unstable, they resemble parents as well as at times produced variants. The important conclusions from mutation theory was that mutations are initiator factor for evolution. Mutants are non-predictable, occur suddenly, produce their effect instantly, therefore a discontinuous process. There is no intermediate stage between appearance of mutant form and parent plant. Mutations are cumulative in nature and occur on multiple occasions, to increase the frequency of mutant in a population. A single mutation may give rise to a new species. Environmental factors work as selective pressure to allow the growth of beneficial mutants and eliminates lethal or non-useful mutants. So there is a sort of a natural selection going on here, wherein if the environment is not permissive, the mutant won't grow. Only if the environment is permissive and favorable to the mutant will the mutant grow in that condition. So this is the parent individual. Mutation creates some variation. For this individual the variation is not favorable, therefore it is selected against. This dies out. The normal individual still persist. Reproduction occurs, mutations occur. In a case where the parent phenotype is not favorable anymore, the favorable mutations will survive and reproduce. There are experimental evidences that support de Vries' theory. The experiment that de Vries did was reproduced by several other scientists, and they also came to similar conclusions. This was also done in species that were different from evening primrose. They were done in other species. Mutations found spontaneously in nature and appearance of mutant varieties strengthen the mutation theory. Example, Ancon ship was produced from ordinary ship in a single step in 1981. The mutated ship was short-eyed and it was useful for farmers as they couldn't jump low stone fences. Hornells or polled Hereford cattle was produced in a single step in 1989 from normal parents. Hairless cats, dogs and mice were produced from normal parents in a single step. Vennothera lamarckian has 14 chromosomes, but mutants were having 16, 22, 20, 24, 28 or 30 chromosomes. Mutations are genetically linked and inheritable because the mutations happen in the genetic makeup of the organism. A single large mutation can produce new species in plant. For example, delicious apple is an example. Evidences against the theory of against mutation theory is that the mutations are rare occurrence. Hence, it's difficult to assume that all of the plant and animal life that we see today could appear solely based on mutation. The relationship between flower and insects, such as the length of proboscis in the insect and the position of nectarized flower, cannot be explained by mutation theory. Mutations are recessive, whereas mostly mutations are recessive, whereas generally dominant mutations are the only ones that bring about evolution. So this is the mechanism of evolution that have been proposed till now. Then there are other changes that have occurred, other experiments that have been done, which have showed that it's actually a sum of all three and not a single theory that can explain all of these effects. Are there any questions till now? Okay. Then I will discuss a few previous few questions and then we are done. Okay. So the first question is, the primitive Earth's atmosphere is considered reducing because it contained abundant free oxygen. It had low gravitational forces. It had low atmospheric pressure, or it was rich in hydrogen compounds. Hydrogen compounds like methane and ammonia. The answer is D. It was rich in hydrogen and compounds like methane and ammonia. If it contained abundant free oxygen, it would have been an oxidizing environment. Modern theory of origin of life is distinguished from earlier theories as it relies entirely on philosophical reasoning. It is based on experimental evidence such as Miller-Urey experiment. It supports the theory of special creations. It is a combination of religious and scientific ideas. The answer is, it is based on experimental evidence such as Miller-Urey experiment. Reddy's jar experiment challenged the idea of abiogenesis by demonstrating that microorganisms can arise from the broth spontaneously, showing maggots only develop from eggs laid by flies, proving that flies can grow in sealed environments, showing that life arises only in the presence of light. Remember Reddy's experiment in which he had 3 jars, wherein he kept one open where maggots grew, kept one sealed with gauze where maggots grew on the gauze, not on the meat, or third one where it was completely sealed, in which case flies didn't grow at all. So what they challenged the idea of abiogenesis, which is spontaneous generation of living organisms from inorganic compounds, by showing that maggots only develop from eggs laid by flies. Direct evidence for the theory of evolution is DNA sequence comparison, analogous structures, behavioral similarities between species, fossil records showing transitional forms. The answer is fossil records showing transitional forms, because these form the connecting links between ancestral forms and the current day organisms. And analogous structures give an idea of the theory of evolution, but that's an indirect evidence. That's not a direct evidence. The role that mutation plays in evolution, uh, as it ensures all offsprings are identical to their parents, it generates genetic diversity necessary for evolution, it eliminates harmful alleles from the gene pool, it causes uniformity in the genetic makeup of a population. The answer is it creates genetic diversity necessary for evolution. Sexual reproduction is considered as advantageous for evolution as it ensures clones are produced, it reduces mutation rates in offsprings, it introduces genetic variability through recombination, it allows for faster reproduction compared to sexual reproduction. The answer is it induces genetic variability through recombination. Recombination is something that you'll probably learn in later classes, wherein the alleles present in both the parents combine and can form a third allele which is slightly different from both the alleles that are present. Main concept of Haeckel's biogenetic law is embryonic development reflects evolutionary biology. Evolution is guided solely by environmental factors. Organisms develop by acquiring traits during their lifetime. Complex organisms appear simultaneously. The answer is embryonic development reflects evolutionary history. This is the evidence. So essentially, Haeckel's biogenetic law provides evidence that evidence is based on embryology, where comparisons between embryonic structures gives us an idea of how organisms have evolved. Connecting links like peripatus provide evidence for evolution as they have completely unique traits unrelated to other organisms. They exhibit characteristics of two different groups of organisms. They are transitional fossils between plant and animals. They replicate solely through abiogenesis. The answer is they exhibit characteristics of two different groups of organisms. Therefore, they provide an evolution of a common ancestor for these two groups of organisms. Method that provides an absolute age of fossils using radioactive decays, morphological comparison, stratigraphic layering, carbon dating, relative dating. The answer is carbon dating. The other examples of radioactive decay are uranium or potassium, radioactive uranium or potassium dating. Principle that underpins the concept of homologous organs is spontaneous generation, parallel evolution, convergent evolution, divergent evolution. The answer is divergent evolution. The organic molecules that are precursors to RNA and DNA according to chemical theory are amino acids like glycine and alanine, fatty acids and glycerol, polysaccharides like starch and proteins, sugars like ribose and nitrogenous bases like adenine. The answer is sugars like ribose and nitrogenous bases like adenine. Okay. Are there any questions? Please let me know if there are any questions from today's topics. If there are any questions, you guys can go ahead and ask. Otherwise, this is the end of the session today. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining in. See you next week. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I will upload the video later. Anything else? Okay. Okay, if there are no questions, this is the end of the session. Thank you.